Another year, another Manchester City versus Real Madrid Champions League semifinal. This year, however, Ancelotti came out with his tactical tweaks for Real Madrid that really made it an interesting first leg against Manchester City. Here's the tactics behind both of the teams. Let's start with the formations. I think the best way to understand this game from a tactical perspective is to first understand what the team's formations were in and out of possession. Real Madrid came out in their typical 4-3-3 formation with that midfield three of Kroos, Modric, and Valverde. However, this match, Ancelotti tweaked his system a little bit, putting midfielder Camavinga at the left back position. We'll see where this comes into play a little bit later. Manchester City out of possession were also taking up their typical 4-4-2 shape, which they've been using to effectively high press teams in the Premier League and in the Champions League a ton this season. When Man City were in possession, they've been using a 3-2-5 or a 3-2-4-1 formation, a system that Pep has been favoring over the last few weeks, especially in the Champions League and against Arsenal in the Premier League. One of the center backs in John Stones move into the midfield in possession to create a midfield two with Rodri, with Kevin De Bruyne and Gundogan in the half spaces and Haaland up top. A key feature of this Manchester City 3-2-5 formation is the box midfield that's created between the two half space players in Kevin De Bruyne and Gundogan and the two pivots in Stones and Rodri. This midfield box has been the staple of Pep Guardiola in the second half of the season, and it's been this midfield box that many teams in the Premier League have tried to copy. This midfield box is kind of what makes this formation so great, as it allows the midfielders to play off each other easily in the center of the park, and it's what's given Pep Guardiola's Manchester City so much success during the second half of the season. A formation that's typical of Real Madrid to use when out of formation is the 4-5-1, as the wingers tuck in the midfield, keeping Benzema up top as the sole striker. However, this was more than just your typical 4-5-1 from Real Madrid. So instead of being your standard 4-5-1 from Real Madrid, Ancelotti basically said, "Hey Pep, I know you're going to take advantage of the box midfield, so what if we just prevent it altogether as hard as we can?" This meant players such as Kroos, Modric, Valverde, Rodrigo, and Vinicius, all man-marking those center four midfielders, creating that box midfield. It created a Manchester City mid-block that was extremely narrow in the midfield. I mean, look how many players Real Madrid have in the center of the field. Even when a player like Kevin De Bruyne or Gundogan would shift to the outside to try and get some freedom away, someone like Valverde, Modric, or Kroos was willing to follow them all the way on the outside to help their fullback, so that they wouldn't be able to use their midfield box to create an overload anywhere on the pitch. This kind of made playing through the middle impossible for Manchester City for most of this game, and it was really hard for them to gain any traction through the middle of the pitch. You can see examples here of Manchester City trying to pass through the middle. I mean, just look how many Real Madrid players are there, waiting to press the receiver of the ball or to get the rebound once a tackle has been made. This led to us in the first half often seeing players like Kevin De Bruyne and Gundogan shifting to the outside because it was the only way that they could get some time and space on the ball. And even then you saw players like Modric, Kroos, Valverde kind of following them towards the outside and not really letting up that pressure. So for a lot of the first half, we saw Manchester City controlling the game with their possession of the ball like they typically do during games. However, when Real Madrid did get the off chance and the odd counterattack from a Manchester City mistake, this is how they capitalized. They usually kept Vinicius Jr. high and outside. He was literally hugging the halfway line and the touchline at the same times at some points during the first half. I mean, and just look how much space it gives him for Kroos or Modric or Valverde to pick him out from across the field. And once one of the three attackers like Rodrigo, Benzema, or Vinicius had received possession, all three of them will work in tandem to create an attack against Manchester City. Typically, it was kind of a 3-on-3 attack, the three center backs that Manchester City were deploying, and this worked really well. I mean, Ancelotti gives these three forwards as much freedom as they want to move across the front three, and this created a lot of problems for Real Madrid in the first half. It was one of the main reasons why the first goal happened. I mean, this front three was moving so freely across the back line that Manchester City had a hard time marking them, gave Vinicius some time and space. He was able to shoot and score for Real Madrid's first goal of the game. Manchester City did have quite a few chances during the first half, and this is really the biggest thing that helped them, progress forward and create those chances. Real Madrid at times tended to press higher up onto Manchester City, whether it was Vinicius, Benzema initiating the press, and then you would see the midfield of Modric, Kroos, and Valverde have to follow in behind, to keep up that high pressure. But a lot of the times, Real Madrid doesn't have specific pressing cues for the entire team to join in that press. So this would leave space open between the lines for Man City players to abuse, especially Gundogan, who was very easy to find in these pockets of space in between the lines. Kevin De Bruyne was a little bit harder to find as Kroos, Valverde, and Modric were keeping more of an eye on him, so Gundogan was the player if they wanted to progress up the field that they found a lot of the times between the lines. Moving over to the second half and after the Real Madrid goal, Real Madrid really started to establish their dominance on the game. We saw them pushing forward a lot more frequently, and I think the main reason behind this was some halftime tweaks by Ancelotti. One thing that Ancelotti wanted to do in the second half was a high pressure, and he wanted to prevent City from getting into that familiar 3-2-5 formation. If they were able to press Stones before he was able to move into the midfield position next to Rodri, they could create some uncomfortable situations for City. And that's what we saw as their pressing cue during the second half, where Benzema, Vinicius, Rodrigo, and Modric would all press intensely once they saw the chance to disrupt Stones and disrupt that City possession. By far the biggest tactical tweak and the biggest change in the second half was the movement of Camavinga, Modric, and Kroos. We're going to go inside the mind of Ancelotti a little bit and go through his thinking. So you have Manchester City, who are one of the best pressing teams in the world, but on the other hand, you also have Camavinga, Kroos, and Modric, who are some of the three best midfielders in the world, maybe ever. These guys are incredibly press resistant. So what do you do if Manchester City comes out and presses you high? Well, if you have these three best, most least press resistant players in probably the history of football, why not just use them to break the press every time? So that's what he did. He said, hey, Modric and Kroos, you're going to drop into the defense because that's where you're going to be able to get touches and space on the ball. And Camavinga, you can roam into the midfield. These shifts in formations and shifts in positions really messed with Manchester City in the second half. It made it impossible for them to figure out where Modric, Kroos, Camavinga were on the field and how they were going to be able to press at the same time effectively because Kroos, Modric, and Camavinga were just cutting through their press in the second half. And this is partially why I think Real Madrid dominated for a lot of the early stages in the second half. It was because they were extremely press resistant and City were having a very hard time defending them, and they were able to take a commanding lead over City for much of the second half. But you never want to count out Manchester City, and that's where Manchester City came back, was able to get their goal, and go through to the second match with a 1-1 draw. So the biggest things that worked for Manchester City in the second half were using Kevin De Bruyne and Gundogan in those half spaces, and manipulating the defensive line and the midfield line in order to find those little spaces in the middle of the field for De Bruyne, Gundogan, Rodri, or Bernardo Silva to take a shot. Rodri had a great shot from this space in the first half, and it was the key movement of these players around the top of the box that allowed Kevin De Bruyne to get his shot off in the second half and Manchester City's first goal of the game. Another key part of the second half was the movement of Kevin De Bruyne and Gundogan. They really wanted to create some one-on-one situations on the outside with Grealish and Bernardo Silva. Having Kevin De Bruyne and Gundogan move centrally to attract the attention of the fullbacks and also a center back with them. This let Bernardo Silva and Grealish have some one-on-ones on the outside where they created some dangerous chances in the second half. Overall, this was a great tactical battle to watch from both Ancelotti and Pep, and it seems like Ancelotti was able to match Pep at every step during this game. It's going to be an incredible second leg, and I wouldn't doubt any Real Madrid magic coming out in the second leg, but we'll see what happens.